Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm your host, Jessica Wilson. This episode is sponsored by Sacramento Outboard Services, a Black-owned business serving the Sacramento and West Sacramento areas. On this episode, I get into fashion and queer aesthetics with Mahlah. In my first I'm Still a Dietitian segment, let's briefly discuss how the news media covers nutrition. It seems like the more sensational the story and the more shame it inspires, the more likely it is to get covered. We recently shifted from years of hearing about the benefits of plant-based diets in the news to coverage of ultra-processed foods, many of which are dairy and meat alternatives. If you're not sure what an ultra-processed food is, you're not alone. And don't worry. On the next episode, I interview my friend Amy, the food engineer I made try moon juice dust in the podcast trailer. Recently, NPR and many more media outlets ran stories about how UK author Dr. Chris Tullochon ate 80% of his calories from ultra-processed foods, which resulted in him, apparently, not sleeping, being unhappy, developing anxiety, and more hunger than was typical for him. This story is not news. This is not a research study. It's one guy's experience of eating Cocoa Puffs for breakfast. Yet, it's still covered in a way to make the public feel like this is a ubiquitous response to having ultra-processed foods in our diets. So, this month, August of 2023, I'm continuing to eat my regular food things, and then next month, I'll be the one to eat 80% of my diet from ultra-processed food. I'll keep track of my sleep, anxiety, hunger, and a variety of other things this month, August, and next month, September, to compare, and report back to see if Dr. Tullochon's outcomes are universal. First, I'll need to see if it's possible to even clearly define what an ultra-processed food is. Amy and I will discuss the squishy definitions, and we'll try to come up with my rules for this 30-day experiment. And now, you'll get to hear my conversation with Mahlah. Mahlah is trans-nonbinary and lives in London. They are of Sri Lankan, Trinidadian, and Bayesian ancestry. They have a corporate job and model as one of their many side hustles. A recent gig was for Adidas and Bape. They have their own clothing brand, Fagoire, which centers queer and trans experiences in streetwear. I met Mahlah when they were playing soccer at UC Davis, where they helped start the Coalition for African Diaspora Student Athletes, a group that helps unify, educate, and support Black student athletes all over the nation. I recently caught up with them during their visit to California, and we started a conversation about queer aesthetics. So you're here with an opinion coming from someone who is creating fashion, modeling, and I would say a great fashion critic indeed.
Yeah, I do think I critique fashion quite well, actually. Yeah, I'll agree on that.
Yeah, you critiqued my fashion, which is how we started talking about this in the first place.
I didn't realize I did that. That sounds like me, so I do apologize.
And that's how we got to this episode. In addition to trying to get them to tell me how to cut my hair, it didn't work. I pitched Mahlah my first audience questions. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Mahlah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, it's nice to be here.
As we get started, can you tell people what you're wearing today?
I'm wearing a pair of baggy, cargo brown trousers with some all tan superstars, some sage socks, this kind of purple and green jumper pattern with lots of accessories on my face, neck, and ears.
Tell me about your accessories.
I bought them all with my own money. No, I'm kidding. Most of the ones in my ears I get from jewelry shops, and my nose and my face. And then all the ones around my neck. One of them is from Sri Lanka, and then there's some jade on it from the Philippines, and then the butterfly is a artist, Giganti, I think their name is. I think that's how you pronounce it. They made some necklaces, so I bought one. And then one is from the charity shop, it's some fake pearls.
Can you tell me more about why you wear the butterfly? I see it in all of your fashion photos, and it just makes me very curious.
The butterfly?
Yeah.
I just like it. Like, I've been following Gigante on Instagram since I was like 16, 17. And I've always liked their art. I have their art tattooed on me as well. It's fairy. So, I don't know.
Okay.
They dropped the necklace and then I didn't get it and it sold out. And then they said they weren't going to make it again. And then they did make it again in like a different dimension. So I had to get it.
Do butterflies and fairies mean anything to you?
I don't know. They're just kind of free and fruity. I love them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they're so soft.
All right. Speaking of softness, what's your queer aesthetic?
Mine as an individual?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm still, I do know, but I feel like I'm still exploring my style, which is a weird thing to say because I think a lot of people know me as someone who has quite like a distinct style, but I like quite tight fitting tops and then really baggy trousers and silhouettes. I like wide silhouettes. I love a chunky trainer or like a loafer. I don't know. I just like things that are a bit playful, like a bit cute. Like lots of accessories, like, yeah. Bit of a maximalist.
Oh, tell me what that means.
It's, I guess, the opposite of a minimalist. Like a minimalist is someone who wants to minimize everything in their surroundings, and a maximalist believes in there being beauty in maximizing everything.
I had not heard about it when it applies to fashion. I love that.
No, you've seen it. You've probably seen it in like decor and stuff. A lot of kind of like 1990s, like American ghetto fashion is quite maximalist if you think about it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Hoops, grills, like hella chains, like yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you're here with an opinion coming from someone who is creating fashion, modeling, and I would say a great fashion critic indeed.
Yeah, I do think I critique fashion quite well, actually. Yeah, I'll agree on that.
Yeah. You critiqued my fashion, which is how we started talking about this in the first place.
I didn't realize I did that. That sounds like me, so I do apologize.
I mean, I know who you are, so it's not like I show up in whatever I'm wearing and not expect a critique. Or
I'm very critical. I'm such a hater. I was talking about this with my friends recently. I'm such a hater.
Yeah, you did it kindly. You said, so what's your fashion? Just like that.
I just said, what's your fashion? Like, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah. You didn't even say, like, what's going on with your fashion? You were like, what's this?
Yeah, I do that often. Sometimes, well, what did you say? I don't even remember what you said. I
have fashion aspirations. Like, I'm very clear whose fashion style I would love to have. And those people spend a lot more money on their clothes than I do. So I need to get excellent at thrifting.
Well, that is part of the downfall of caring about fashion and aesthetic, is that eventually you will want to spend more money on clothing. It's quite a sad road to go down, actually.
A side effect of fashion.
Like, save your money, get a house deposit, don't get into fashion.
I mean, fair. I'll buy your stuff for sure. Once.
Thank you.
It's available.
Yeah.
What's your relationship to fashion?
So my dad owned a streetwear shop when I was growing up. It was called Alley Cats, and he used to sell like old vintage streetwear or new streetwear, like I guess Stussy and Diesel, stuff like that back in the day. And then I grew up, and I've always loved clothes and fashion, but I also think like growing up as queer, I had an interesting relationship with my wardrobe for a long time, because if you met me now, I'm quite mask presenting, but there were periods during my childhood where I was probably overperforming femininity. So like wardrobes were always quite not the funnest space. And then I think as I've come more into my identity, fashion is just like so fun. And I love designing clothes and making clothes. Like anyone that knows me knows I'm sewing. I just Oh, yeah, and sometimes I model. That was really random, though, in my whole life. It was kind of random occurrence.
Yeah, tell us how you got into modeling.
So I was at, how I got recruited for my first shoot it was in the year after my uni. I finished uni and I was looking for jobs. It was looking pretty bleak in the UK at that time. And I was in the club. I was at an event called Pussy Palace, which is like a non-binary and trans like club night. Yeah, so I met some girl at Pussy Palace. We're friends now, but they asked me if I wanted to get casted in Vivienne Westwood's Autumn Winter lookbook or collection for Fashion Week. So I was like, yeah, because I need money. Yeah, unemployment is not is not doing so cute. So I went and I got it, and then I've kind of been doing shoots for a while since. I did an Adidas Bape collaboration. It was my most recent work, which was pretty cool. So I shoot sometimes. It's kind of like my side hustle, my little side bag.
Awesome. Do you like it? Or is it just a fun side gig?
It's a job, you know, at the end of the day. It has its things. But I do enjoy it most of the time.
Can you tell us more about what you're sewing in your spare time?
I have been wanting to start a brand for like 2-3 years. Oh, the longest ideation phase of anything in my life. Called Fagoire. I should be doing a drop very soon though, which is kind of exciting. Finally, Jesus. All my friends have been gagging for it.
That's exciting. Tell us more about your brand and what we can expect from it. Who's it for?
It is everything that is like queer and brown and black and trans and gender variant. It is for the community. Like, honestly, it's so weird talking about it because I've been ideating about it for so long, and I use the word Fagoire so casually, like in sentences, and like my friends use it, so it's just become a kind of thing within, I guess, my nucleus. But I guess honestly what I want to do with it in the future is use it as a way to give back to my community, whether it is through workshops or like using profits to go towards people's like GoFundMes for their gender affirming like care. And I think honestly our community, like there's so much going on in our community that it's so difficult and overwhelming sometimes. So I guess clothes is kind of my passion. I'm trying to combine my passion with giving back to my community and creating community.
Yeah, that's amazing. Do you want to tell us how you came up with the name?
This old man in America called me and my friend a faggot, and I thought it was really funny. My friend is like a very feminine, like gay man, and and I was like, "Oh, I'm not a faggot. I'm a fagoire." Like that's literally how I came up with the word. Yeah,
I love that. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I love that it generated a brand name for you.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like bigots need to get more creative with their like bigotry. It's getting boring. We've heard that one.
What would you recommend to somebody who is thinking about their queer aesthetic and how to explore it?
Damn, that's a really big question. How do you define queer? Like you personally, I'm asking because I always find this interesting when I ask people this. And yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm okay being on the spot. And then will you answer as well?
Yeah, of course.
I like to identify queer as a both gender identity, sexual identity, and both a political stance. Like I would love for queer to be inherently political because, you know, there's the straight but make it gays out there who I love you.
You said the straight but make it gays.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You know, they have a house, 2 kids, a dog.
Oh, you mean the gays that kind of straight?
Yes.
I now say the heteronormative gays because I'm trying to be inclusive.
Can you tell me more about how that makes it more inclusive?
Well, I feel like, okay, we all know what we're talking about when we say the heteronormative gays. They are the ones who somehow you're gay and you still come off as so straight. I think it's less about straightness and more about, like, when we're talking about this idea of queerness, it's less about straightness and it's more about, like, heteronormativity. Because I've met straight people who adopt queerness as a political stance. So, like, I don't want to pigeonhole straightness as being this, like, binary thing that's, like, very rigid. Like, there is freedom in sexuality within straightness as well. So I usually just say, like, heteronormative instead of saying straight. I'm trying to, like, unlearn bias against straight people or whatever.
The people hearing this will be inspired to do the same.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think queer is, like, often spoken about as, like, an umbrella term. Or as if, like, a separate sexuality, kind of like an other. But, like, obviously something that's not straight or heterosexual. Yeah. But I always kind of resonated with queer when I heard Bell Hooks' definition of queer. But Bell Hooks speaks in queerness as queer, not as being about who you're having sex with. That can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and has to invent and create to find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. So that's my understanding and what I, like, adopt when I talk about queerness.
I love that. I can see how you could have the straights also have queerness in them as well.
Yeah.
Most of the time, honestly, they are queer. They just don't know it yet. So shout out.
Yeah, I know. I am the worst because I truly believe, ask my friends, I truly believe everyone is queer and no one can you cannot trick me and tell me anything else. I just think it's how everyone's socialized. And obviously I think some people are more swayed to certain things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, anyway, that's my own agenda, queer agenda. Yes, there is one for the conservative out there.
Okay. Q&A. We have a question from a cis woman who recently divorced her cis male husband.
Love that.
And now she's exploring her love it for her, and is now exploring her queer identity. And in this very impulsive moment, got a divorce mullet to explore the queerness. So she immediately reversed course, but is now exploring alternatives. The alternatives here is not
doesn't like the mullet.
Didn't like the mullet. Didn't like being straight. So alternatives of all kinds. The desired vibe is I'm here, I'm queer, but also I have to keep up femme appearances for the sake of my career. And actually, I think I'm pretty femme, even though I can install toilets, and therefore my haircut might not be the signifier.
Wow, that was a lot. I'm like, whoa.
We have a
what in the gender? No, I'm kidding. Okay, so what's the question?
I think she's relying on her hair to signal that she's queer when perhaps people can't tell that she fixes toilets, and also presents more as femme. So I like and I understand a queer flashcard that
when you say queer, is she like lesbian or does she date everyone? Right
now she's out there and dating everyone.
Okay, period.
Attracted to all of the people right now.
All and above. Okay. I think relying on your haircut to show the world that you're queer is a really difficult task. And she might have set herself up there a bit. I don't think, unless if you're thinking in terms of very binary ideas of manhood and womanhood, masculinity, femininity, and how that interacts with sexuality, I would say, if you're a woman, a cis woman, and you want people to know you're queer, maybe present do your hair a bit more mask. I don't know, shorter, right? But obviously she is a femme girl. I don't know, maybe get a pixie cut.
I love a pixie cut.
But also, like, why don't you like your mullet? Did you just not pay for it, like, as much as you needed to? Mullets are cute. I like mullets.
Perhaps, well, from what I saw from the question submission, it looked more like a shaggy situation rather than like a proper mullet. So
okay,
I think
she didn't get a mullet. Maybe tell her get a wolf cut. It's kind of like a mullet, but it's a bit softer. Like, it's a bit more gradual. Tell her to look it up. She'll Pinterest. Yeah, is your best friend.
Okay,
she might like it. If she thought going down the mullet vibe was the right vibe.
Wolf cut, pixie cut. Do you want to say anything about for the sake of my career situation?
Yeah, I always think that's a bit of a weird one when people do that. I'm like, are you sure it's because of your career? You know what I mean? I'm like, maybe we can be honest over here. It's safe. Yeah, I always think that's a bit weird because unless you work in like a really conservative industry, how you present shouldn't, except it does. How you present does impact your opportunities, and I'm not going to act like it doesn't. But for me, I can't work in environments where who I am, meaning my identity, I can work in an environment that forces me to compromise that. And the way that I dress and the way that I present has such a huge like correlation with that I just can't really relate to feeling that way. Because to me, that feels like a compromise. I don't know. I'd question it a little. Like, do you just not want to present as masc? Because presenting as masculine also doesn't make you masculine. And presenting as feminine doesn't make you feminine. We like gendered ideas and socialized ideas of masculinity and femininity are so much more complex than that it would be like kind of reductionary to say that having a masculine haircut makes you masculine. I don't know. That's just my opinion. So yeah, maybe a pixie cut, I guess.
I think that's great. I'm going to insert myself into this Q&A and say that in 2 or 3 days, I have my first haircut appointment in a year. My hair, for listeners who are not viewing the length of my hair, when curly hits like just below the shoulder, I do need to take like a good 2 to 3 inches off because it's just not viable anymore. So if you got to style my hair for me, what would you do?
Well, I think it's more of a conversation because it's less about what I want and more about what you want to show. I have current questions about your current hairstylist. What is their skin tone or complexion?
They are a light-skinned Black woman who does...
That's what I needed to hear.
Okay.
Have you spoken to her?
Yeah.
It's like you have to figure out what you like. That's what a style is about. It's about feeling aligned and like liking what you're looking at. It's not about other people's like fashion assertions on you. Do you know what I mean? And I say that also to the other mullet, my baby queer mullet. I'm like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, you just have to figure it out. Like, you might get a pixie cut and not fucking like it. And you're just going to have to wait for your hair to grow out if you want it long again. If you're really desperate, you can play with wigs. Do your thing.
Another question. How do you feel when straight people have a queer aesthetic? And I think for the purposes of this question, we can say the straight people who are the straights, not the straight people who might be a little queer.
I mean, it depends. Most people have no understanding or don't know anything about queer history. And I think it's difficult, especially like in the world we live today, and especially in the United States and the UK, they're being consistent threats against like trans and gender non-conforming people. And I think what today's current political climate / culture war that, you know, right-wing conservative politicians are trying to muster with the trans debate, we have to think about like 100 years ago, where were these people? Where were trans people? Where were queer people? And we were being, like, our erasure was being naturalized through how you were dressed. So back in the day, the gender binary system and a specific fashion binary was used to police like queer communities and arrest people for cross-dressing, which we look back and we look at history and it looks like cross-dressing laws, but really you see trans men, trans women, queer people playing with gender and identity within their fashion. You fast forward today and you have cis straight men using feminine aesthetics that were really championed and were aesthetics that were broken through by queer people. And they are being credited and I guess almost praised for aesthetics that a community has been literally our existence has been erased, and that erasure has become naturalized within our society. So it's like, I guess it's quite difficult looking at straight people who explore queer aesthetics and like being able to see joy in it or any type of appreciation in it. But I guess if that's how you dress, that's how you dress. Do you know what I mean? Like, who am I to say anything? But yeah, that's kind of my, I guess, 2 cents on it.
Yeah. How do you find your own queer aesthetic without falling into stereotypes? Or does it even matter if you fall into stereotypes?
I was going to say, without falling into stereotypes, who cares when the people who created those stereotypes are like cis straight people? I'm like, a lot of stereotypes are observation, but a lot of them are just observed from a completely stupid lens. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, the stereotype of black people can't swim. Very common stereotype. Yeah. And it was just like normalized. And no one was talking about, well, I wonder why maybe black people might stay away from water. What happened in history? Like small things, or even like black people and fried chicken in the South. I'm like, do you know what I mean? I'm like, these are just, who cares? I'm black and white chicken, who cares? Yeah, so no, I don't think it matters if you play into your stereotype. Like, I'm very queer. I don't care. I like it. It's like, I guess the girls who know, like, it's nice seeing other queer people on the street also. So I don't know. For me, I guess that also depends on like your location and like where you're from and your background and your culture, because a lot of people don't have the opportunity, I guess, to present as they wish. So like, depending on like safety and stuff. But for me in London, I look like, yeah, I'm queer.
One last question for you. How does race intersect with gender in the UK? And is there like a strong stud culture in the UK?
Okay, so those are 2 separate questions. I'm going to tackle the stud question first. I think it's interesting because stud culture obviously is a very specific culture that came out of the United States, like post slavery and black people being able to work, and where women and especially mask presenting women took up spaces, I think back in the day it was stud and fish culture. So fish were like femmes and studs were like masks or like butch if you're not black. There's definitely stud culture in the UK because I feel like just the Americanization of like global culture is just like inevitable. But I would say that a lot of people's relationship with their race and ethnicity and their gender is to do with their cultural background. Like, whether you're from the Caribbean and there's long histories of like homophobia that stems from slavery, that stems from like colonial imposition, whether you're from African nations, whether it's a similar thing, Asian nations or indigenous nations. I think it's also though like recognizing that prior to colonization, all of our communities, there were third genders, there were other genders. We didn't live in a as binary system as Europeans. So I think it depends. For me, my background has a huge impact on my gender identity, like, because my identity is not just like who I am as a person. It is who I am as a person, period. But like, it's also a political stance, and it's also like, it's not just about how I want to live my life. It's about how I think everyone should be able to live their life. And for me, the more you're free, the more I'm free. So the more you feel comfortable expressing exactly as you need to, the more I can do the same. So, and it's also breaking away from these colonial oppressive systems. Like, they are literally killing us. They are killing us. And we're all, I think what I always think about is like, we're all dealing with the same systems. We're all trying to tackle the same problems. It just looks different in everyone. It doesn't look the same. Men, like, you have men complaining about male suicide rates going up. And you're like, I wonder why. Look at the restrictive, like, binary system that is, like, forcing men's, like, masculinity into this tiny little box. Like, no wonder they feel like they can't express themselves. Like, whether it's, like, feminists arguing for women's rights, whether it's, like, trans people screaming for liberation, like, all of these things, we're all dealing with the same systems. It is so linked. There's no way it can't be. If it's not, I don't know what to say.
So I would say that you are someone who is working towards the destruction of late stage capitalism just by existing.
Yeah.
And yes.
Even though obviously I live in it and I need to pay bills, but like, yeah.
We need shelter and food.
Yeah.
And then with your clothing brand, I think that you are going to help others feel seen and feel bold in what they're wearing. And that in and of itself
is the goal. No, I'm like so excited for it. I'm so excited. I'm actually really sad because my first drop is going to be a t-shirt, and I just think t-shirts are so boring. Like, but it should be a cute t-shirt, and it will be able to fund all my other designs. So I'm actually really excited. So yeah.
I think that's amazing. And I think helping others feel bold in their fashion and themselves is a great way to have more of us have the capacity in order to disrupt and destroy the systems that are oppressing us.
Also, fashion is killing the planet. Like, let's not forget.
I think we need to bring you back to talk about how fashion is killing the planet. I think that's a great...
Talk to my sister.
Okay, we need to bring your sister and you back to talk about how fashion is killing the planet. To wrap up the episode, I would like to thank you again for coming on and sharing who you are, what you're about, and your queer aesthetic. I'm so grateful for this conversation.
Thank you. I had a nice time.
And that's Mahlah. If you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to send me some topics and questions for them to answer in future episodes. I'd love to have them back. Be sure to follow them at Mahlahsian, that's spelled Mahlahsian, on Instagram and TikTok, and at Fagoire on Instagram. Lastly, if you could follow the show and give it a rating, it would let others be able to find it. I'll be back next week, and don't forget to make it awkward. I've been your host, Jessica Wilson. This episode was sponsored by Sacramento Outboard Services and is a production of The Body Politic. The audio and video was edited and mixed by the stellar Jen Jacobs.